So the guy who would have evicted my family was Harland.
No, you see, your family were on the Massey estate, so it would have been one of the land agents for Massey that would have, if he was evicted, he was on the other estate. Now, all that land was originally owned by the Tottenhams.
Yes.
The Tottenhams owned all of Glenfarne originally, and then in the late 1700s, it was left to two brothers, and one brother sold his portion, which ended up in the possession of the Massey family, and the other brother came and built the house and stayed here, and kept the other half of the estate. So
Massey was the landlord up in Minnkerah.
Yeah, Massey was the landlord up until the 1880s. He was what you would term an absentee landlord. He lived in Dublin, and he used to come down on hunting retreats.
Well, what happened in the 1880s to Massey?
He got into financial difficulty, like a lot of landlords, when they lived all very lavish lifestyles. They had huge properties to keep up, and they basically all got into financial difficulty, despite owning thousands of acres.
Do you know who he sold it to?
It ended up because by around 1907, I'm not sure of the dates, you had what was called the Wyndham Land Act. So that allowed for these estates to be transferred to the tenants. So it was around that time that the local people got possession of the land.
But I wonder who owned that land between the 1800s, 1880s to 1907.
I haven't looked at the paperwork for it. I'm sure there's paperwork on it somewhere.
Yeah.
It probably was in some kind of abeyance with solicitors and.
Well, why would families have been evicted, or would my family have left voluntarily?
Yeah, I hadn't heard that there was much in the way of evictions on that estate.
Okay.
There's certainly evictions on the Tottenham estate.
Yes.
In around the 1880s.
Right. And 1884, that's when...
And even in the 1890s. Now, maybe some of your family were on the Tottenham estate as well.
Well, I think some of them were.
Yeah, so some of them might have been on the Tottenham estate, because there was definitely evictions on this estate.
But 1884 is when they left, and 1884 is when 19 families were evicted from the Tottenham land.
Yeah, that could be true. Now,
but it wouldn't have been Tottenham who.
But a lot of them left for just pure financial reasons or whatever.
Yeah.
So they left for lots of reasons.
Yeah.
They weren't necessarily all evicted.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't sound like my family was necessarily evicted then. They were not part of the Tottenham estate.
Yeah, no, they weren't. I didn't hear of any evictions on the Massey estate. The Tottenham got into financial difficulty himself in the 1880s because of the railway.
Right.
Because he had put so much money into the railway, and that pushed him over the edge. And he became an MP around that time as well, and he took a hard line with the land. Because there was agitation. You've got to remember that the land league was very political,
right.
And it was there were families that could afford to pay, but didn't pay the rent on purpose, and they were withholding rent and slowing down, making it hard to collect the rents. But this was all a political thing to starve the landlords and to put pressure on the landlords, and it did work in the end. The Wyndham Land Act came in then in the 1907, I think it was. And that, as I say, the tenants then got possession of the land. They got title to the land.
Yeah.
They still had to pay. There was a system where they paid, and the government stepped in, and basically the landlords all got paid. And some people say they got paid well for the land, but the tenants would pay their annual rent. But it eventually went towards ownership of the land.
So it was like a mortgage.
It was like a mortgage, yeah.
It's great.
It was like a long-term mortgage.
Yeah.
Whereas you could make a better in America, or
they did really well.
Yeah.
In the U.S.
They used to work. You see, what happened was they left places like here, where from the age of 7 or 8 they were used to being out in the fields with potatoes, working hard.
That's right.
And then they got to America, and sure, it's the same as today. Some of these immigrants are used to work, and the people that are growing up that aren't so used to it, they were used to hard physical labour.
They were.
So they a lot of them did fairly well. Where did they go first in America?
They went to Woburn. Then that's still there.
Where's Woburn?
Woburn. Woburn, W-O-B-U-R-N, Woburn.
Yeah, where on the state?
Yeah, it's north of Boston.
Oh, right, yeah. Woburn.
It's only about 18 miles outside of Boston.
There would have been a lot of Irish in there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and there were 10 children, and almost all of them married. And so there are lots of cousins. And
they,
and there were other Gilgunns already there.
Yeah, so they were probably connected.
Yeah, they were. They wouldn't have gone. My great-grandfather, Thomas, used to say that he was a trader in Leitrim. And by that, we assumed that he smuggled cattle across the McNean River. He also bought a dairy farm, and he and I guess cousins or relatives, brothers, founded the Gilgunn Milk Company. So they did pretty well for the first generation. The second generation really took off. That generation has attorneys and judges and high school principals and teachers and nurses and mayor of the town of Woburn. The third generation, which I think I represent, are also doing very well. Accountants, teachers, professors, nurses. So they didn't want to leave Leitrim. They talked about how they missed the green hills of North Leitrim, but they did make a life for themselves. And most of us lived to a ripe old age, just as my great-grandparents did.